This is ThinkTech Hawaii. Community matters here.
Hey, aloha and welcome to the ThinkTech Hawaii studios. I'm Andrew, the security guy. We're going to be kicking off another episode of Security Matters, and we've got Jeff Owens in the house with us today. Jeff, we appreciate you coming in.
It's a pleasure to be
Thank
here.
you so much. We're going to be talking a little bit about workplace violence prevention and threat assessment and all that stuff that Jeff's a specialist in. But the first thing, Jeff, I like to talk about to security folks about what's kind of keeping you up at night these days.
I think because of my niche field that I get involved in is hearing the next morning, oh, he suddenly snapped.
Oh.
Because people don't suddenly snap.
Mm-hmm.
That is the thing that, because it is, these kinds of events oftentimes are preventable.
Okay.
And so when I hear that, oh, somebody did something bad in the workplace, somebody came in and hurt somebody, and they say, well, we never saw it coming, he just suddenly snapped.
Mm-hmm.
That is not true.
Yeah.
And so that's what keeps me awake.
I agree with you. We have a lot of data now that shows us that there's some indicators out there typically. So give our audience a sense of your background, how you sort of ended up in threat management, and just throw some history in there, whatever you want to share.
Okay, sure. Well, I joined the Honolulu Police Department in 1970.
Okay.
You know, so yeah, I go back a ways. And in the 1980s, I was a detective.
Okay.
And I had the good fortune to be among the first group of people who were designated to become hostage crisis negotiators in Hawaii.
Oh, wow.
And so I got involved in that whole field of hostage and crisis negotiation, and as a negotiator on call-outs and events that we went to, and getting some training. And it kind of sparked just a lifelong interest in me. I became fascinated of trying to learn about why people do what they do to one another.
That's a big question.
It's a huge question. I wish I found the answer. I still haven't. I don't
Still
know.
looking though.
I've got
Good.
a few
Good
hints
on you.
here and there.
Okay.
You know. But it became a kind of a passion for me to try to learn as much as I could about this whole issue of interpersonal violence, which oftentimes is interpreted into becoming targeted violence. You know, we can talk about that a little bit today. But so it became an interest of mine. So in addition to my other jobs, and as I moved on and up in the department, I continued to be involved in that, and I continued to try to learn what I could about it. And within the department, I became the so-called in-house expert on interpersonal violence. I did call it adjunct training at the police academy for officers on issues of violence, workplace violence, and dealing with violence.
Oh, wow.
Developed some de-escalation protocols, so that kind of continued too. I retired from the Honolulu Police Department in 2002.
Okay.
Happened to be a major at the time when I retired. And decided I wanted to go into business for myself. And I wanted to do something where I could take the knowledge and skills and experiences I'd had and apply them in the real world because they're beneficial to people. And this sense of service that I guess developed as a cop, kind of continued with me. So I wanted to have a business that was providing a positive service to people, making people's lives better, and still have a business so I could pay my bills.
Sure, of course.
So of course what I did is I took the knowledge I had and I turned it into my company, Transcend Inc., which is for training and consulting. I do training and consulting. Originally started out purely dealing with issues of interpersonal violence, workplace violence, and then identifying the fact that there's a lot of other contributing factors that come into play or associated factors that come into play when we talk about the world of workplace violence. Things like effective communication skills, effective leadership skills, disrespect in the forms of discrimination and harassment. So as a result, I started developing spin-off programs on all of those topics.
Wow.
A lot of them address the EEO issues of sexual harassment, sexual discrimination, gender discrimination, religion, all these different things are out there. So that expanded the business to having all these other programs that I'm involved in too.
Wow, excellent.
So people say, well, what do you do? And it's like, well, what day is it? What time is it? And I'll look at my calendar and let you know what I'm doing. The other area that we branched off into, and I've created a division for my company, which is the security guard training. Because all security guards in Hawaii have to be licensed. Part of that license is they have to complete 8 hours of classroom instruction. I wrote a program that was approved by the state And so we run regular classroom training for those people who want to apply for the security guard.
Yeah, and there's a lot of those. So I would think, exiting military, and those guys, even though they have maybe military type training, anti-terrorism training, whatever they may have gotten in the military, that's not the same as guard training, which is a little less forward, I would think, or a little more observation and less interaction.
Well, the guard training
physical, I think.
the guard training program is really specific because in 2013 a law came into effect. It had been passed in 2010 by the legislature, mandating this 8 hours of classroom instruction.
Excellent. Okay.
And the legislation actually sets out 8 specific topics that have to be covered.
Okay.
The Board of Private Detectives and Guards at that period of time broke that down to 51 subtopics.
Wow.
So it's not something that we have a lot of leeway as to what we're going to cover. We have a lot of leeway of how we're going to cover it. So we try to personalize the classes in such a manner that we will take advantage of people's experiences that they can contribute. The classes are usually highly interactive.
Good.
Like you say, we may have military people with very, very strong security backgrounds or intelligence backgrounds. We may have people who've already been experienced in the security world, or maybe people who didn't, but they have information to share.
Wow.
So we have specific topics and subtopics that we have to cover. We cover them, but we adapt it each time to try to maximize the knowledge in the room so everybody can benefit from everybody else.
Wow. And is that, is there a high demand? You have classes of 20 a week? How many people are going through programs like this?
Well, I haven't got an exact count right now, but we probably pushed about 8,000 people.
What?
Or so. Yeah.
Wow. Since
2013. And we're
Wow.
now we're probably the single largest professional provider of this training.
Still, that's a
but
lot.
There's a lot more people out there because, say, some of the other companies, the security guard agencies, they may do their training in-house. So there's a lot of
I see,
people.
like Securitas or G4S or whoever else big.
Yeah, these guys are going to have. So
Interesting.
if you look at the numbers, there's over 20,000 guard employee licenses have been issued.
Wow.
Now, clearly not everybody is still active. People have moved away or gotten into other, but it's a substantial number of people. I think people underestimate the size of the guard industry in Hawaii.
Yeah, I think because of our hospitality industry, right? They like bodies out there more than electronic security and the sense of the prison, right? You want to have interactivity with people.
By definition, there's an enormous amount of people who actually are guards.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got what you consider your traditional uniformed guards, right? But then you've also got your courier services, the armed couriers. Those people are guards also. Okay. Now you've got hospitals; they're going to have guard personnel. Many of the residential complexes will have business environments. Will have not always contract, a lot of times. Retail security.
Oh, I see. So these might be employed by the actual condo association, and they have to also have this certificate.
Right.
This training.
Yeah, so this is
Gotcha,
what the law requires that
Interesting.
all guards and those who act in a guard capacity.
Nice.
That's the exact
I
wording
didn't
out of the
even know.
law.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So you think about it, okay? Loss prevention, those guys are actually guards. Okay. As I said, retail and residential, all that kind of stuff. By definition, the host, doorman, bouncer, whatever term we want to use, they are by definition guards. So there's a lot of people out there that actually fall under that and need to get that guard card. So,
Interesting. That's an excellent service. So you mentioned healthcare, and I had Ed Howard on here recently from Castle, also a former HPD.
I know him well.
And good. And so he gave a talk recently at one of our events about this acceptance of violence in the healthcare industry and how it's starting to change. I guess healthcare workers are really exposed to violence, and it had kind of been just, it's part of the job. And so there's now starting to train away from that and create, raising awareness that, no, that's not part of the job. And so very interesting to me. And I know that's a passionate topic of yours. So let's, outside of healthcare, let's start to shift to just the idea of threat training. This threat awareness, or how do you approach, other commercial businesses, let's say non-healthcare for now, with these ideas for training, or how do they come to you? What do they come looking for?
Sure, okay. But just to mention one thing about the healthcare.
Okay, sure, no problem.
Yeah, because I will say, the OSHA has identified that the healthcare industry as one of the high-risk industries.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Yeah, because, and it's not usually from the patients.
Yeah.
is from the patient's family,
Yeah.
friends, associates, because they're the ones that are all emotional.
And
about
they
what's
get
going
mad,
on.
like you're not taking care of my son, you're not taking care of him fast enough, and then next thing you know, they're in your face and they're angry and like, wow, how do you de-escalate that?
Right.
Oh,
and that
amazing.
actually kind of, I brought, because it does segue into the non-healthcare environment.
Oh, okay, good.
Because if you look at, kind of go back to kind of a basic concept here, right? So whether it is a business office, whether it is a retail store, a hotel, whatever it might be, you got people interacting with people.
Yep.
And when people interact with people, you get emotions, you get thoughts, you get feelings, you get perspectives, you get biases, you get prejudices. All of these things exist within all of us and come into play in our interactions with one another, right?
Sure.
So, as we just talked about, you got the person in the hospital, that, you know, you're not taking care of my loved one the way I want you to. I'm getting excited about it. And I start to lose control, is the term that we use.
Okay.
And there's a certain reality to that. People don't snap, but they start to act in irrational manners, okay? So this brings me to what my passion is and what I want to, you know, kind of where do we start with all this, and when I'm working with businesses and what do we do? And that is to try to start from the position of threat assessment, threat management.
Okay.
There's a lot of really good workplace violence programs out there. And most of them, though, are reactionary.
Okay.
The event has occurred or is occurring, and now what are you going to do in response to that? And that's very important training, and we need to get that knowledge out there. We need to get that training out there. That's important information for people to have. But what we want to do is prevent the drama from occurring in the first place.
I hope so.
Right, right. And that's where threat assessment, threat management comes in.
Okay.
Now, you know, we can look at all the academic definitions of that, and that scares the heck out of people. You know, but it's not esoteric at all. You know, when we talk about threat assessment, it's really a process of determining the credibility and likelihood of a violent event occurring.
Okay.
You know, threat management is simply figuring out, well, what can we do to reduce that likelihood of occurring?
Okay.
Right. So, in the field I work in, a lot of times you'll hear people talking about, and we do this in our training, and we work with the companies, talking about the pathway to violence, which is really just a formalized and validated expression of something we all know intuitively anyway.
Okay.
Okay. And so the threat assessment kind of takes a look at behaviors. Now, as you know, if somebody gets upset about something, that's when they start to get all these emotions come into play, right?
Yes.
Right. And they're going to do something with those emotions.
Yeah. The arms start to flail in, the voice goes up. Sure.
Yeah, right. And they're going to have, they're either going to escalate or they're going to de-escalate, right? You know, you can only stay the same for so long.
Okay.
Right? So what happens is if something doesn't happen to help that person de-escalate from that unhappiness, that grievance that they have, then they're going to increase their behaviors, and their behaviors will become more negative.
Okay.
Yeah? Now,
Hold that thought right there. That's a good segue point. We're going to pay some bills. We're talking about escalation, de-escalation of emotion, and you know, to help manage threats in the workplace. We'll be right back in a minute.
This is ThinkTech Hawaii, raising public awareness.
Hi, I'm Dave Stevens, the host of Cyber Underground, every Friday here at 1 p.m. on ThinkTechHawaii.com. And then every episode is uploaded to the Cyber Underground, that library of shows that you can see of mine on YouTube.com. And I hope you'll join us here every Friday. We have some topical discussions about why security matters and what could scare the absolute bejesus out of you if you just try to watch my show all the way through. Hope to see you next time on the Cyber Underground. Stay safe.
Hey, aloha, and welcome back to the ThinkTech Hawaii studios. We're talking about workplace violence and workplace violence prevention, really, is what we're hoping for. Jeff Owens is our our guest today, and he is a certified expert in this topic, and so we are learning a lot. So we were right in the midst of talking about how people get emotive during an interaction of some type, and that emotion they've got to either going to probably go up or they're maybe going to go down. And you were mentioning that you've got to have some tools or triggers to de-escalate that emotion. So let's kind of go from there.
Yeah, so we go that. So what happens is when you get upset about something, the natural thing is you're going to start to have ideas about what you'd like to be able to do.
Yeah.
Right? You know.
Yeah.
I'm going to be driving down the
Oh,
road.
in your mind.
Yeah, that's that fantasy. That's that
okay,
fantasy
okay.
we all and it's normal, it's natural. We all have that,
Okay.
right? So we have that fantasy, and then if something doesn't happen to help kind of bring us back to ground us into reality, that fantasy starts to become what we call ideation.
Okay.
And it starts to become not just, well, I'd really wish I could, to, hey, maybe I can.
Maybe I can.
Yeah.
Wow, scary.
Now, the ideation then starts to become planning. This is how I can. This is what I can do. This is how I will do this, right? Planning then leads to preparation. What do I need to do to be able to accomplish this? What do I need to gather? Do I need weapons? Do I need to, do I need to determine how I make my entries?
Get that person closer where I can grab them.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
And then, of course, there's the breach in the event itself. Right?
Okay.
Now,
Wow.
these are, if you think about it, whenever we've all been upset about stuff.
Sure.
And we've all had probably that where we're getting ready to have that explosive release, right? So all we've done is taken and validated that through studies of people to do the academic stuff and all that and have that pathway to violence. So they have a grievance, they have fantasy, ideation, then that becomes, planning, preparation, breach, and action.
Okay.
So in working with companies and my clients, we kind of start from this perspective. Let's make people aware of, usually there will be some kind of outward signs that somebody's upset.
Okay.
And this is where we get into the prevention side. The willingness to actually recognize that for what it is and then do something about it.
Okay.
Depending on your relationship with the person and the severity of the action, it might be, hey, Andrew, we've been working together a long time, man. You okay? You seem pretty tense lately, And maybe having that friend being able to just let that person have a little bit of a venting, right?
Sure. Just
That
talking
sometimes is, it's good, right? But when the person feels isolated and alone with their grievance, then the grievance becomes very central to their being.
Then
right?
they dwell on and start up that pathway you were talking about.
Exactly.
Sure.
But
Or
very
perhaps they do
importantly,
anyway.
yeah, absolutely. And then very importantly, though, is for that to let somebody in a position of authority become aware.
Okay.
Because supervisors and managers, can't take action on what they don't know about.
That's a fact.
And usually in the workplace, and again, part of the training that we do when we work with the clients is making people aware. Look, your coworkers far better than anybody else.
Yeah.
Probably
See them every
better
day.
than
Spend
your
time with them every
supervisor.
day. Sure.
Exactly. You spend as much, if not more, time with your coworkers as you do your own family members.
Happens.
Think about it.
Yes.
Right? So we know these people, right? So when we see somebody who is acting in a stressful manner, the natural tendency is to not want to recognize that bad things can happen around us. So we go, he's just having a bad day.
Yeah. And you just want to forget it.
Just
or,
forget
or
it. He'll get
excuse
better.
it. Or
And
just
it's
want to
the third bad day.
You
and
want to
it's
hope it changes.
the fifth bad day, but it's just a bad
Yeah.
day. Right? So, but
Hope's not a
actually-
strategy, by the way. Hope is not a strategy.
That's true. I like that. So the reality, though, is if they then make their concern known to somebody in a position of authority, supervisors and managers, because what we do with the supervisors and managers is we teach them intervention strategies, how to approach people, how to talk to people, how to try to get some information from them in a non-threatening way so that they can make an evaluation. Because threat assessment, we all do it all the time. When you're walking down the street, you're evaluating your environment around you.
You sure should be. I sure hope you are out there.
Well, yeah, I mean,
don't
just-
walk around blindly.
Yeah, and to some extent or another, we all, right? So I'm just saying, become more consciously aware,
Yes.
right? So in the workplace, now we can make the supervisor aware, hey, you know what? Jeff has been kind of, I don't want to get him in trouble, but he's been kind of really a little bit touchy lately. Boss can now approach, maybe get some information, find out, is there something? Is there a legitimate concern? Or a concern of any kind? Is there something that now we can help Jeff to move away from that grievance and give them an alternative course of action rather than to continue to escalate on the pathway to violence.
Yeah, oftentimes, I think that if people feel isolated, they don't, they can get blinders on, and there's maybe assistance right here, help, a lot of help that, and maybe you don't know about it because you didn't ask or didn't bring it up, and if you don't, avail yourself of assistance, of course.
Sure.
Your options seem narrower, and perhaps they're down this path towards violence.
And there's just, it seems that people are reluctant to ask for assistance, but they may accept it when it's offered.
Good.
Right?
Sure, I think,
So,
yeah.
And at least we're making the effort. Because if we don't make some kind of effort, then there's nothing to give this person an alternative course of action other than to continue on the pathway.
Yeah.
Right? So if we can do that and we can try, now another thing is that a lot of times, and we talk about this in the training with the clients, is that people are afraid to say something. One is, well, I don't want to get him in trouble.
Yeah, that code of silence, I think it comes, they're thinking about protecting their friend, but not realizing they could be hurting the entire organization.
Yes, exactly. And what they're not realizing is they're not only hurting the entire organization, they're hurting themselves by putting themselves at increased risk. Because when this person has that explosive release, when he goes off, there's a whole nother bunch of dynamics that come into play here, right? Okay. But the other thing, they're not doing that person a favor.
Yeah,
They're
not at
actually
all.
hurting that person.
Yeah.
Because if we can intervene when the behaviors are still relatively small and minor, then the consequences to the offender is relatively small and minor.
And would this, in your estimation, be you hoping to, if you hear them ideating about something, I think I'm going to kick his ass or whatever when you can get them earlier before they start those preparations and before because once you get prepared, I mean, there's nothing left to do but act. So hopefully you're getting them far earlier in that pathway.
Well, I won't say nothing, but yeah, it becomes much, much harder. The further along the pathway, the harder it is to intervene. But if it's there, I'm going to, after work, I'm going to wait by his car, I'm going to kick his, right? You know what? Now we have an opportunity to intervene before something really bad has happened, to let this person know that there's going to be accountability. One of the little terms I like to use with the clients is there must always be an appropriate response to inappropriate behavior.
Yes.
So now the behavior is inappropriate, but it's not way up the line there, right? So we're going to have an appropriate response that says, look, that's not acceptable. We're not. Now, I understand you're angry, you're upset. Let's work on finding a resolution.
Yeah, there you go.
Now the consequences are small. The person may still have disciplinary action, but it's relatively small. If it gets up to the point that he actually goes, waits by the car, and
now it's criminal.
Now the guy's got all kinds of. So it's important to let the coworkers know that when you inform your supervisors and managers of your concerns, you're not getting somebody in trouble. They're responsible for their own behaviors and actions. They got themselves in trouble. But you're actually doing them a favor, as well as all of your coworkers, and as well as yourself.
Yeah, and this is a big thing. So we talk about how we do that as an organization, at least on an annual basis. I'm the insider threat officer. I'm our facility security officer. So I give training to let everyone know what we're going to do, so that if we have to have a chat, someone's come to me, so that everyone knows that it's safe. They need to know that it's safe to let me know there's a problem with someone or whatever, right? And I think that's important. And another thing we started doing, Stephen Covey was in here actually, and he teaches the speed of trust, the 13 little trust elements. So I also give him all that book. So I'm teaching them how to build trust, so that we know what lack of trust looks like as well. But I don't harp on the lack of trust. I harp on the building trust. And I hope that helps. I find that awareness of the process, awareness of these things only helps us all.
Absolutely.
And so when you get into organizations that are a little not as forward-looking or not very well developed in this area, what's the immediate thing that comes that you see? Like, you talk to the C-suite, he's not connected, or how can you sort of tell? What
Actually, in the vast majority of the cases, the response is, I'm really glad somebody's willing to talk about this. I'm really glad they brought somebody in to help us, because most of us know all these things that I'm talking about.
Isn't that something? It's not like you haven't heard it. You've
No.
been hearing it since grade school.
Yeah, most of us, and again, another term I use it, is most of us go through life unconsciously competent. All I want to do is help you make you consciously competent.
I like that. Very good.
So people, they go, I'm validating what they know experientially and intuitively, because we're all human beings, right?
Sure.
So they know these things, but I come in and I'm validating it, and people are usually, yeah, this is good. And for the C-suite, this is fantastic, because something you mentioned earlier on, and that whole trust and that sense of security and safety in the workplace, there's a synergy there. When people feel safe in the workplace, they're more comfortable, they interact more willingly and readily, communication improves, because again, these are the issues that contribute to this situation that I mentioned earlier, right? You got to have communication, knowledge, and respect. All three of them have to be in place in the workplace, right, for the workplace to function correctly. So when people feel safe, that they can talk to one another, interact with one another, you have far fewer problems with your personnel, you have higher levels of productivity, and less likelihood of additional stresses in the workplace contributing to people starting to escalate because of a grievance.
Exactly. Just go back to that book. I picked it up because I was interested in those elements, but he equates trust to actually money. A trusted relationship, if we can shake a hand and have an agreement, that took 2 seconds versus I got to get my lawyer, you got to get yours, so that's just the analogy of the difference in cost between trusted relationships. And I think for what you're talking about here, if we've got a culture that we've built inside of an organization, whether we did it on our own or we brought in some outside assistance, that organization should really be more profitable at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Or potentially more profitable.
And the big smile when you said that is because usually I open up my trainings and presentations in this topic area with the companies by saying the single most important thing that you can do to reduce the risk of violence and improve organizational harmony is to create an organizational culture of respect. And that organizational culture is absolutely critical to having an effective, efficient organization that works very well and reduces the risk of bad things happening.
Man.
And as a manager, supervisor, C-suite, and owner, that's far fewer problems that you got to deal with in a much more profitable and happy world that you live in.
And that's something. Jeff, thank you so much for your time today.
It's been my pleasure.
Hawaii, workplace violence is a real thing. There's something you can do about it. If you don't have help for yourself, get a hold of Jeff, get some help, help your organization, help each other, because security matters. Thank you.